"This tray should suit you," the flight attendant said with a smirk, handing a plain sandwich to the woman in seat 3C while offering gourmet meals to the men around her. Little did she realize this passenger was a powerful CEO. Just hours after landing, that same CEO made one call: fire them all immediately. The crew quickly learned what happens when you underestimate a woman in a gray suit. Camille Forrester straightened her gray blazer as her town car pulled up to the terminal at O'Hare International Airport. At 45, she had perfected the ability to fly under the radar despite being the CEO of Forrester Technologies, one of America's fastest-growing companies. Today's flight to New York came just before the biggest announcement of her career, acquiring her main competitor in a $2.8 billion deal that would shake the entire industry. "Your documents, Mrs. Forrester," her assistant said, handing over a slim folder. "And remember, the board is expecting you at JFK at 3 p.m. Camille nodded, sliding the folder into her leather handbag. "Thanks, David. I'll see you tomorrow." As the driver unloaded her carry-on, Camille glanced at her phone one last time. A message from Howard Richardson, CEO of Meridian Airlines, confirmed their dinner plans for next week. His airline had long provided exclusive travel for her executives, making her account worth millions. Though they had never met in person, their business relationship was mutually beneficial. Inside the terminal, Camille skipped the standard security line and headed straight for the premium access gate. The attendant gave her boarding pass and ID a glance before waving her through. "Enjoy your flight, ma'am," he muttered, already looking to the next traveler. Camille didn't mind. She had grown used to the polite indifference. Early in her career, it had bothered her how men in suits received instant respect while she had to earn it over and over. Now she almost welcomed it. It revealed how people truly behaved when they assumed no one important was watching. The premium lounge buzzed with its usual energy. Business travelers filled the space, mostly men in sharp suits, their confident voices echoing as they chatted about markets and golf scores. A few women in professional attire were scattered among them, some joining the loud conversations, others focused quietly on their laptops. Camille found a quiet spot, ordered sparkling water, and got to work. The final review of the acquisition paperwork required her attention before tomorrow's reveal. So absorbed in her notes, Camille barely noticed the boarding call. As she walked to the gate, she saw the crew welcoming passengers. The lead flight attendant, a blonde woman with a polished smile, conversed deeply with an older executive in a navy suit. "Mr. Peterson, lovely to see you again. We've got your favorite scotch ready," she beamed. When Camille stepped up, the same attendant, Lindsay according to her name tag, gave her a brief nod. "Boarding pass?" Lindsay asked, her warm smile replaced with a routine efficiency. Camille handed over her first-class ticket. Lindsay scanned it and returned it without making eye contact. "Seat 3C, she said, already shifting her attention to the next traveler. "Down the aisle to your right." On board, Camille stowed her carry-on and took her window seat. First class was steadily filling with its usual crowd, mostly older men in their 50s and 60s, with a few younger professionals scattered among them. She watched as each male passenger was welcomed with personalized greetings from the cabin crew. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds. Welcome back. Can I get you a glass of champagne?" "Mr. Pierce, it's been a while. How was London?" Camille observed silently, taking it all in. No one had offered her a pre-flight drink, even though her profile with Meridian Airlines clearly showed her platinum elite status. Over 100,000 miles flown just in the last year. As the last of the passengers came aboard, a tall man in a perfectly tailored gray suit approached her row. "3, he said with a polished smile, pointing to the aisle seat beside her. "Looks like we're seatmates today." The name Jonathan Pierce was etched onto the cufflinks, just visible beneath his sleeve, as he settled in next to her. Almost instantly, he flagged down a passing flight attendant. "Lindsay, great to see you again," he called like they were longtime friends. Camille turned back to her documents, mentally preparing for what she expected to be a revealing flight, though not necessarily for the reasons the crew might assume. As the safety demonstration wrapped up and the plane pushed back from the gate, Camille had already packed away her materials, now focused on the cabin's subtle social choreography. Lindsay, along with another flight attendant, began moving through first class offering hot towels. "Here you are, Mr. Pierce," Lindsay said with a graceful gesture, presenting the steaming towel. Careful, it's hot. When Lindsay reached Camille, she simply placed the towel on the tray table without a word, already turning toward the next row. Camille wiped her hands slowly, watching Lindsay chat easily with the businessman across the aisle. It wasn't that Camille expected special treatment. What stood out was the sharp contrast in basic courtesy. Once the plane reached cruising altitude, cabin service began. Lindsay approached the first row with a tablet in hand. Good morning, gentlemen. For today's lunch, we're offering seared salmon with quinoa, a premium Angus beef burger, or a gourmet chicken wrap. And what would you like to drink? Camille listened as Lindsay worked through the cabin, keeping her cheerful, attentive tone with every male passenger. The man next to her, Jonathan, ordered a beef burger and a scotch on the rocks. Excellent choice, Mr. Pierce, Lindsay said with a smile. But when she finally reached Camille, her demeanor changed. No smile, no eye contact, just brisk efficiency. What would you like? She asked flatly. Could you tell me about the lunch options, please? Camille asked politely. Lindsay's mouth tightened slightly. We have a sandwich or a wrap left. Camille lifted an eyebrow. I thought salmon and beef were also available. Those are limited, Lindsay said curtly. We've run out. Out of the corner of her eye, Camille noticed another passenger who had boarded after her, being served salmon. She made a mental note but said nothing. The wrap then, and sparkling water, please. We'll serve shortly, Lindsay said, walking off without acknowledgement. Jonathan leaned over slightly. First time in first class? He asked, his tone casual but a bit patronizing. Not exactly, Camille said with a small smile. I fly quite often. Well, tip for next time. Order the kosher meal ahead. It's usually better, and they can't run out since it's pre-reserved. Camille nodded politely. Thanks for the tip. When drinks were served, Camille noted Jonathan received his scotch in a crystal glass, the premium brand label visible. Her sparkling water, by contrast, came in a plastic cup. No lemon, unlike the other drinks she'd seen served. To her right, an older man who had boarded last received his bourbon, a bowl of warm nuts, and even a personal greeting from the purser. When the meals arrived, the disparity became even more obvious. Jonathan's tray held the beef burger served on real china, garnished with microgreens, accompanied by truffle fries. A linen napkin and metal cutlery completed the setup. Lindsay set Camille's tray down without a glance. Instead of the wrap she had ordered, there was a plain turkey sandwich on a paper plate, a bag of chips, and plastic cutlery wrapped in a thin napkin. This isn't what I ordered, Camille said calmly. Lindsay gave a tight smile. We ran out of wraps, too. This tray suits you just fine. She turned away before Camille could reply. From the row behind, Camille overheard a man being offered both the wrap and the salmon, the very items that were supposedly gone. Camille took out her phone, opened her notes app, and started typing quietly. This wasn't the first time she'd faced such treatment while flying, but today, with this airline, the timing couldn't have been more telling. She unwrapped the sandwich slowly, keeping her composure despite the insult. The bread was dry, the filling sparse, nothing like the gourmet plates around her. As she took a bite, she noticed Lindsay once again hovering near Jonathan. How's the burger, Mr. Pierce? Can I get you another scotch? Excellent as always, Lindsay, he replied. And yes, another would be perfect. Lindsay beamed at Jonathan before turning away, never once acknowledging Camille beside him. It was as if an invisible wall separated seats 3C and 3D. Camille took another sip of water, quietly continuing to jot down her notes on her phone. Roughly 20 minutes into meal service, she noticed the flight attendants gathered at the galley. Lindsay's voice carried just enough for Camille to catch the stray phrases. Always complaining, and shouldn't even be up here. A glance revealed Lindsay subtly nodding in her direction while whispering to a colleague. The other attendant peeked briefly, then looked away the moment she saw Camille watching. Jonathan was now deep in conversation with the man across the aisle. Their voices were confident, echoing across the cabin as they traded stories of golf weekends and corporate deals. Camille listened silently as they exchanged business cards and made plans for a country club meetup the following week. Excuse me, Camille said eventually, pressing the call button. The light above her seat glowed for nearly 5 minutes before Lindsay returned. Her face made it clear she didn't appreciate the interruption. Yes? Her tone was clipped, formal but frosty. I didn't receive any dessert, Camille said evenly, having watched others in first class enjoy chocolate mousse. Lindsay's smile was tight, her eyes emotionless. We've run out. Anything else? Before Camille could answer, Lindsay was already turning to leave. As she moved past, her elbow bumped Camille's water cup, sending the contents across the tray. Oh, Lindsay's reaction felt practiced. I'm so sorry about that. She dropped a flimsy napkin on the spill, dabbing carelessly at the water now dripping onto Camille's gray slacks. Let me know if you need anything else, she added before walking off, leaving Camille to manage the mess. Jonathan glanced sideways and offered a dismissive, tough luck, before returning to his lively conversation. Camille patted at the damp fabric of her pants, calmly typing another entry into her phone. She had encountered subtle forms of bias throughout her career, but rarely anything this overt. As a woman who'd climbed from entry-level coder to CEO, Camille had long since learned how to manage adversity with patience, insight, and precision. When the head purser passed by a few minutes later, she raised her hand gently. Excuse me, may I have your name, please? The man blinked, surprised, but remained professional. Kevin Matthews, ma'am. Is there something I can assist you with? Not right now, Mr. Matthews, Camille said. I'd just like to have your name for my records. His expression flickered with confusion, but he nodded and continued down the aisle. From her seat, Camille watched Lindsay serve freshly brewed coffee to the men nearby, smiling as she offered them chocolate biscotti that had somehow appeared, despite the earlier claim of no desserts. Jonathan received his coffee in a porcelain cup, and the biscotti Lindsay deliberately avoided looking Camille's way. The message was unmistakable. Some passengers, in her view, were more deserving of first-class service than others. And Camille didn't cut. Camille closed her notes app and opened her email. She began typing a message to her assistant. David, please collect the contact details for Howard Richardson's office. I'll need to speak with him directly after landing. Priority, immediate. With the email sent, she leaned back in her seat, calm on the outside, while her mind raced through the exact action she'd take once they arrived in New York. The rest of the flight followed a similar pattern. When drinks were served again, Lindsay skipped Camille's row entirely, though she smiled sweetly while offering Jonathan another scotch. When Camille pressed her call button a second time, another flight attendant responded. The coolness in her manner made it clear Lindsay had already spoken to her about the difficult passenger in 3C. Camille asked for coffee and received it only after a long wait, in a flimsy paper cup, lukewarm and black, missing the milk she had requested. She didn't complain. She simply made another note in her growing log. About an hour before landing, the purser walked through the cabin, distributing hot towels to passengers. When he reached Camille, he paused, his gaze drifting toward the galley where Lindsay stood watching him. Would you care for a hot towel, ma'am? He asked politely, though his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Yes, thank you, Camille replied, her smile small but composed. As he moved on, she saw Lindsay intercept him in the galley. She whispered something that made him glance back at Camille with a weary expression than before. Beside her, Jonathan had dozed off, his half-empty glass still balanced in his hand. Across the aisle, two businessmen were deep in conversation, their voices carrying clearly. You hear about Forrester Technologies? One asked. Word is they're making a major acquisition tomorrow. Camille Forrester's company, the other replied. She's been making serious moves lately. Not what anyone expected when she took over. Ruthless, from what I hear. Smart, too. Doesn't put up with nonsense. Camille kept her face neutral, though a trace of a smile tugged at her lips. Her reputation had indeed spread through the business world, even if few recognized her by sight. She had always preferred to keep a low public profile, rarely attending media events, often declining speaking engagements. The anonymity had advantages. It let her see how people behaved when they didn't know who she was. As the plane began its descent into JFK, the cabin crew started preparing for landing. Camille closed her laptop and stored her things. As Lindsay passed by, their eyes met briefly. Lindsay quickly looked away. The discomfort in her expression was unmistakable. She had overheard the businessman's remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, came the captain's voice overhead, as we begin our descent into New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport, please make sure your seatbelts are fastened, Tray tables stowed, and your seat backs are in the upright position. The captain's announcement continued as the plane descended through the clouds, revealing the vast sprawl of the city below. Camille looked out the window, quietly reviewing the sequence of actions she'd take after landing. The acquisition announcement was set for tomorrow morning, but another, more immediate matter required her attention first. As the wheels touched down, a flight attendant thanked the passengers for choosing Meridian Airlines. The moment the seatbelt sign dinged off, the cabin erupted into the usual scramble for overhead bins, despite the crew's request for everyone to remain seated. Jonathan stirred awake, checked his watch, and quickly gathered his things. He gave Camille a curt nod but didn't say goodbye before merging into the aisle crowd. Lindsay moved down the cabin, smiling brightly at each male passenger, thanking them personally and saying she hoped to see them again soon. When she reached Camille, she offered only a brisk nod before continuing. Camille remained seated, letting the initial rush pass. There was no reason to rush. Her driver would be waiting, and she had a phone call to make before leaving the airport. Near the front, she saw Lindsay laughing at something Jonathan had said. The attendant's entire demeanor was transformed. Warm, professional, engaging. A courtesy reserved for a select few. When the cabin was mostly empty, Camille finally rose, collecting her bag with quiet precision. The real work of the day was just about to begin. The jet bridge buzzed with activity as passengers funneled toward the terminal. Camille walked slowly, taking in her surroundings. Near the aircraft door, Lindsay and the crew stood offering cheerful goodbyes to selected passengers. As Camille approached, Lindsay's smile faded into a bland expression that barely acknowledged her. "Thank you for flying with us," she said flatly, already glancing at the person behind Camille. Camille paused. "I'll be sure to document my experience thoroughly," she said, her tone light but her gaze cutting. A flicker of unease passed across Lindsay's face, quickly masked by practiced professionalism. "Have a nice day, ma'am." Inside the terminal, Camille bypassed the crowd swarming toward baggage claim and made her way to the Meridian Platinum Lounge. The lounge attendant scanned her boarding pass. Her eyes widened slightly as Camille's name triggered a flag in the system. "Miss Forrester," she said, her tone shifting quickly to respectful surprise. "We weren't informed you'd be flying today. Please come in. Would you like a private room prepared?" "That would be perfect, thank you," Camille replied, noting the sudden shift in tone now that her elite status had been recognized. Inside the private room, she placed her bag down and pulled out her phone. She dialed a number from memory, waiting only a moment before it connected. "David, I've landed. Has Mr. Richardson's office responded?" "Yes, Miss Forrester. He was quite surprised by your request for an immediate meeting. He's actually at JFK for a board presentation and can meet you in 30 minutes. "Perfect. Have him come to the Platinum Lounge, Private Room 3, and, David, make sure he brings the crew manifest and passenger service records from Meridian Flight 1382, Chicago to New York today." "Already requested, Miss Forrester." Camille ended the call and settled into the plush chair, opening her notebook. Every instance of disparate treatment was logged with precision. Times, statements, specific actions, all recorded in detail. 20 minutes later, a gentle knock preceded the lounge attendant's voice. "Miss Forrester, Mr. Richardson has arrived." Howard Richardson entered the room with the air of a man used to being in charge. In his mid-60s, with silver hair and a tailored suit, he offered a practiced handshake and polished smile. "Miss Forrester, a pleasure to finally meet you in person. I must say, your request for an immediate meeting was quite unexpected." Camille stood and shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for accommodating me, Mr. Richardson. Please have a seat." Howard settled into the chair opposite her, his expression politely curious, but faintly puzzled. "I understand you were on our Chicago to New York flight today. I hope everything was satisfactory?" "Far from it," Camille replied, sliding her phone across the table. "I've documented a pattern of discriminatory behavior by one of your flight attendants, enabled by the purser. I'd like you to review it." Howard's brow creased as he picked up the phone. He scrolled through her notes, his expression shifting, curiosity to concern, concern to alarm. "This is concerning," he said at last, looking up. "I assure you, Miss Forrester, this is not reflective of Meridian's service standards." "I would hope not," Camille replied coolly. especially considering that Forrester Technologies has been your second largest corporate client for the past 3 years. Our contract, worth approximately $22 million annually, is up for renewal next month. Howard's face blanched. I had no idea. Few people connect my name with my face, Camille said. I prefer it that way. It allows me to observe how your staff truly treats passengers when they think no one is watching. She held his gaze. Now, Mr. Richardson, I'd like to discuss how you plan to address this situation, because I can assure you it will be addressed, one way or another. The private lounge had grown uncomfortably quiet as Howard Richardson placed Camille's phone back on the table, his fingers slightly trembling. The full weight of the situation had landed. One of Meridian's most valuable corporate clients had been deliberately mistreated, and the consequences could be significant. Ms. Forrester, he began, his voice now deeply apologetic, I want to personally express my sincere regret for your experience today. This is unacceptable. I agree, Camille said evenly, but I'm not interested in apologies. I'm interested in action. Howard straightened his posture and gave a firm nod. Of course, I've already sent a message to have the crew held at the airport. An internal investigation will begin immediately. That's a start, Camille replied. She turned her laptop toward him. But you should also know, Forrester Technologies isn't the only major client affected by this kind of behavior. My assistant has compiled data showing similar complaints from female executives at other companies with active contracts. Howard's eyes widened as he scanned the report. I had no idea this was part of a broader pattern. Most discrimination is, Camille said quietly, until someone decides to stop ignoring it. A knock on the door interrupted the moment as Howard's assistant entered, handing him a folder. The crew manifest and service records you requested, sir. Thank you, Howard said, spreading the documents across the table. Lindsay Thompson has been with us for 8 years. There were some notes in her file, but nothing ever triggered formal action. Because each complaint was likely dismissed as an isolated incident, Camille said. That ends today. 40 minutes later, Lindsay Thompson and purser Kevin Matthews stood in the administration office at JFK, facing Howard Richardson and Camille Forrester. Lindsay's confident demeanor had dissolved into visible shock the moment she recognized Camille, now seated beside the CEO. Ms. Thompson, Howard began solemnly, I've reviewed substantial evidence of discriminatory conduct on today's flight, supported by multiple passenger accounts and your service history. Lindsay's face flushed. Sir, I can explain. There's no explanation that justifies what I witnessed, Camille interrupted calmly, or what appears to be a pattern of behavior over time. Howard nodded firmly. Effective immediately, both of you are suspended pending investigation. Based on what we've already seen, I expect this will lead to termination. Kevin opened his mouth to protest, but Howard raised a hand. The decision is final. Meridian Airlines does not and will not tolerate discrimination of any kind. As Lindsay and Kevin were escorted out, Howard turned to Camille. I'll be initiating a full review of our training protocols and service standards. Camille nodded. I'll be watching the results closely, Mr. Richardson. Respect shouldn't depend on whether you recognize the person you're serving. In business and life, true character is shown in how we treat people when we think no one is watching. If Camille's story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from today? Remember, everyone deserves respect, regardless of appearance or gender. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one being underestimated.